Okay, Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Can I welcome you to this meeting of Boston Borough Council's Overview and Scrutiny Committee? I'm Paul Gleeson and I am chair of the committee. Before the meeting starts, I need to run through some housekeeping. I would like to remind everyone in attendance this evening that the meeting is being streamed on YouTube. Mobile phones should be turned off or muted. Please ensure that you use the microphone system at all times when addressing the meeting. You do not need to move or adjust the microphones. Simply raise your hand as usual, wait to be called, and then press the center button to activate your microphone before speaking. Speak clearly and directly so everyone in the room, remote participants and recordings can hear you. When finished, press the button again, turn it off. Thank you very much for that. As I say, if you're going to carry on talking though, don't keep turning it on and off because I have to keep activating it. So only turn it off when you've actually had your full say on something. Thank you. There's no member of the public. Finally, can I advise that abuse or intimidation of any kind will not be tolerated. Any disturbance will result in the meeting being adjourned. Anyone who is deemed to have breached these requirements will be warned and asked to refrain, and if their behaviour persists, they will be required to leave the meeting. Now we move to part one of the agenda, preliminaries. Election of a vice chairman. Can I please have nominations for the role of vice chairman? Councillor Welbury?
I nominate myself.
Thank you. Is that seconded? Councillor Scoot? Councillor Finnegan? Thank you. Are there any other nominations? All those in favour, please show. Carried. Thank you. Councillor Welby would like to come and join me at the top. Yeah. Apologies for absence.
Thank you, Chair. We've received apologies for absence from councillors Anne Dorian, David Brown, Patsy Marson, Barry Pierpoint, and Stuart Evans.
Thank you. Declarations of interest. Does any member wish to declare any interest in any item on tonight's agenda? No, thank you. Minutes. Do I have permission to sign the minutes of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee meeting held on the 6th of November 2025? There are some exempt minutes that we will need to deal with at the end unless people are happy to accept them now. If nobody's got any issues to raise on the exempt minutes, I can accept them now. Yeah, everybody happy with that? Thank you. Public questions. Are there any questions from members of the public received 2 clear working days before this meeting?
There are none for this meeting, Chair.
Thank you. So we move now to part 2 agenda items. Housing standard policy. Our first item of business this evening is the housing standard policies, which starts at page 7 of the agenda. This will be presented by the Group Manager, Safe for Communities, John Challen. John.
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, this is quite a detailed item, so we've come a little bit mob-handed tonight. There's myself, Luke Settle, Emily Spicer and Councillor Baxter here to have a discussion on this. But before we go into that, Luke is just going to give a brief introduction to the 3 policies, if that's okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, John, and thank you, Chair. Good evening, councillors. Thank you for your time today. We're here to discuss the 3 housing standards policies listed for Cabinet in the new year. These are the empty homes policy, the houses in multiple occupation HMO licensing policy, and the enforcement policy. The strategic objective was to update and regularise existing policies across the South and East Lincolnshire Councils partnership so that working practices and approaches are aligned. These policies are able to be delivered within existing resources without the demand of requiring more resources unless there is an expressed interest and desire to proactively go beyond the approach outlined within the policies. There is no negative effect to income by delivering these policies, and it's worth noting that the Council's current policies are fit for purpose, although these policies take into consideration the recently published private sector housing strategy previously discussed at Scrutiny. The headlines for each policy are as follows. For empty homes, the policy introduces a scoring and rating matrix to prioritise the properties of greatest concern to the Council. The policy enables each individual council to utilise the powers and tools available to them without committing all three councils to the same activity, as we are mindful that certain activities, such as compulsory purchase orders, can require a large resource commitment. Headlines around houses and multiple occupation licensing policy. The policy moves away from a flat fee structure and introduces a new fee structure separated into two parts. Part A for the application and Part B for generating a fee per individual room. The policy introduces a risk rating for generating periodic inspections, and the three appendices that accompany this policy are licence conditions, amenity and space standards, and the fit and proper person relevant offences and criteria. Finally, the enforcement headlines are around updating to reflect the new schemes such as the Homes for Ukraine accommodation inspections, revision of fixed penalty amounts to reflect the national model being steered by the Renters' Rights Act, having recently gained royal assent, revised fee structures introducing a set fee for the service of a notice, followed by an additional fee for each hazard, as well as an increase to fees of civil penalty notices, steering away from the matrix approach and introducing a set fee per offence in line with the Justice for Tenants national model. Myself, John and Emily will welcome any questions in relation to these three policies. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Any questions now from any members? Councillor Danny.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to come to page 8 when we have empty homes policy. I mean, looking at the market in our days now, there is a lot of houses are empty, and that's due to, I think, having bad experience with certain tenants. So it is an occurring situation, and I have some few friends of mine who have like letting agencies, and they have this issue now. So I know that the law, we cannot enforce them to rent it, but if we have empty homes and the landlords didn't want to rent them, is there anything we can, dialogue with them to make it easy for them and, to start renting their homes, or as a council, we can't do that? I mean, approaching them and talking to them.
Yeah, thanks for the question. And absolutely, the engagement part of the empty homes policy is absolutely paramount, because it's not all about enforcement. The policy obviously lists a number of enforcement tools that we've got at our disposal if we need to get to that point. But empty homes can be really quite a complex topic. Invariably, some of the most difficult empty properties that we deal with will have, say, potentially emotional attachments for the people that are now that now own them, because it might be through parents or family members passing away and they've inherited properties, but they can also be quite complex in terms of things like probate and wills and how the property's been left to those that are now in ownership of it. So trying to navigate around that it can be quite a complex issue, and it's hopefully the policy comes across as not being a one size fits all, so that if it's more along the lines of trying to identify what barriers are in the way for someone to overcome in order to start renting the property out. It could be that we need to engage with the Good Homes Alliance, that someone might just need to know about some trusted traders or some advice on how to rent a property out and how to let a property. If that's all that's needed, absolutely great. But the far end of the scale might be that it's a property that's causing a lot of concern locally, a lot of environmental crime. Could be squatters in there, and causing antisocial behaviour, and that's where the enforcement activity may well then need to come in. So absolutely, there's all sorts of everything with empty homes, which makes it a really interesting topic, but also quite a challenging one, depending on which individual property we're dealing with at any given time.
Yeah,
One of the other things, because I think because of the government rules, we have to build new houses. We have to develop more, housing, the housing has to grow because we need them. However, when you look at the reality, we have a lot of empty houses in the same time. If you look at the market in our days, again, it's not many houses are sold on a weekly basis when you talk to each agency in Boston. So it is quite a very delicate matter. And I mean, I support this report. I do understand, and I think we have to go through that. But it just, what you have said, I think it makes sense, and I wish you good luck in that. Thank you.
Councillor Richard Austin.
Can I ask, Mr. Chairman, are empty houses a significant issue for Boston? It just so happens near where I live, I know there's 5 houses that have been empty for years. And I mean, maybe they're paying all the council tax they should do, but they're still empty. I just wondered, are you concerned about number of empty houses, and what sort of enforcement action are you taking, or to reduce the numbers if it is a problem?
Yeah, thanks for that question. And the short answer is yes, we are concerned about them, which is why we want to bring policy forward. Just to give a little bit of background, historically, I'm talking about the last 25 years or so, we've seen empty properties be quite a high priority, both nationally and locally. But also in the last 10 years recently, it has absolutely dropped off in favour of other topic areas. So previously we had empty homes bonuses where local authorities would receive income for the number of properties that were brought back into use, and that was a real incentiviser for local authorities to do that. And also off the back of that, we had discretionary grants available to us to encourage landlords to bring properties back into use. A lot of that has gone by the wayside now, so we're having to manage our processes and policy so that we can incorporate that, and we can introduce that if that's the will of the council. But at the same time, the policy is written in such a way that across the partnership, we're not committing any one of the 3 councils to do something that the other 2 are doing. But also, if one of the councils wants to do something the other 2 aren't doing, equally they can move forward with that. So some of this is down to the ambition of the council as to how much they want to do and where they want to go with empty homes. But the policy itself contains the details of the enforcement activity that, if the council wishes to move forward with it, it's at their disposal to do that. So a bit of a long-winded way of saying yes, it is of concern, but I think to put it into the national picture, Boston isn't any particularly worse off than a lot of districts. We're not in that top 10 percentile, shall we say, because a lot of districts are experiencing exactly what we're going through.
Can I just follow up
Yeah,
and ask, am I right in saying that the only penalty is it double council tax for an empty property? What's the situation?
Yes.
What penalties have people got for leaving their properties empty for long periods of time?
So if you wanted to leave it empty, then and you were prepared to pay the council tax, then yes, that's.
But single, not double.
Sorry.
No, is it double council tax for empty if you?
Yeah, I think it's after
a single
a set period of time. Sorry.
Long terms go 400%.
Yeah, so long terms get to go to 400%. But if someone's prepared and willing to pay that,
so can you repeat that? It's what
400%.
400%. What, you have to pay 400% council tax if it's empty for a long period of time? Oh, right.
But that's if someone's wishing to do that, and there's
and how does one categorize that it's long term empty?
So the council tax team are responsible for issuing that. So once it's been registered as empty, that's kind of day one, should we say, and the clock starts ticking from that period.
Right. Yeah. Thank you.
Are there any other questions from Councillor Izard?
Fight you over it.
Yep.
Not quite sure what we're doing here. I've got a supplementary on the answers you've just given, but I saw the coverage fairly recently about how East Lindsey has a significantly higher proportion of empty homes than we do here, and South Holland as well. Are there any measures that East Lindsey are taking because they've got a, as it were, a bigger problem that it would be useful for us to know about? Because obviously within the partnership, we piggyback on each other's ideas quite a bit. And if East Lindsey have come up with a new or slightly different way of dealing with a long-term empty property, it would be very useful if we knew about it. Like Councillor Austin, I've noticed an increase in the number of empty homes in predominantly rural parts of my ward, which is Curtin and Frampton. And also there's a growing number of Airbnb properties which are empty for 11 months a year or more, which I regret but can't do anything about, and we can't do anything about that. When a property becomes empty, is council tax still payable, or do owners get a 6-month period or a 12-month period where they don't have to pay any? When do they have to start, if that's so, when do they have to start paying again? When does it go up to 200%, and when does it go up to 400%? Thank you.
Yep, so I'll just work through those in order. In terms of the East Lindsey situation, they're not doing it, they're in the same position that Boston Borough is in at the minute, in that there's been quite a few years of inactivity in terms of empty homes because of again the move away from it being a national priority as well as a local priority. But all I would say though is in terms of the numbers, although on the surface of it the numbers can look quite large, we need to bear in mind that a lot of properties that make up those numbers are actually going through some form of sale or through probate, which naturally, even without any council intervention, would see their way through being put up for sale, sold and occupied again. But just because the amount of process that takes, especially if it's things like probate or anything legal, can take 9, 12, 18 months without it really being without there being an issue causing that. It's just the legal process that's causing it. So one of the things that we want to do first and foremost is to try and capture exactly where we feel we are in terms of number of actual properties that are what we would class as an issue being empty. So there's no actual progress being brought forward. They're not being renovated, and it's just the fact that someone's living off site while renovating a home that they will live in or sell eventually, so that we can bring back to all three councils just what we believe the actual picture of say problem empty properties are, and then within that to then look and see what which of those properties there's an appetite to go, whether we want to look at the top 5, top 10, whatever that looks like, in terms of moving forward, and then to start thinking about what the enforcement options are if we need to go down that route. So I say the numbers, we want to present the numbers because that's it's an important vital part of the report. But over the course of time, we'll start to understand those numbers, what they actually represent. In terms of the classifications, Luke, do you want to just come in?
So generally, there's a 1 month allowance for is empty. 2 years is a long term empty. 5 years, that's 200%. 3%. 10 years.
How is it known whether they're
Is your microphone on? No, sorry, just turn your microphone on.
known that the property is empty? If the owner keeps paying council tax, but leaves it empty, is this one way round the penalty for an owner?
Well, in terms of recording, so it's a legal requirement to alert the council tax team of the status of the property. So if somebody was, if the property was empty and they weren't alerting the council tax team of the current status, then that would be an offence in itself. So it may, I think we probably need to, if you wanted further clarification on that, we can seek that from council tax in terms of the actual processes they would then go through if somebody wasn't, if the property was empty and it wasn't being declared, how their legal process would then bring somebody forward, because obviously that would be detrimental to the income of the council if somebody was just quietly paying council tax for an empty property and not actually living in it. But outside of that, I'm not aware of how council tax would then, outside of any of our interventions, how council tax review and monitor that to make sure that they've got their details correct for empty properties like that. I suppose the initial incentive for somebody to register it is because of obviously the initial rebate or the reduction that they get before it then ramps up. If someone is genuinely wanting to sell a property or renovate a property or do something with it, that they will obviously seek to register it. But longer term, appreciate your point that it would be in their interest not to or to try and avoid paying the double, treble or quadruple amount.
I think it might be an idea actually if we ask council tax for a report on just how they deal with empty property that way. It might be useful for us. Thank you. Councillor Izard and then Councillor Danny.
Good evening, everyone. Yeah, I understand these are to make sure the three councils are singing from the same hymn book in that side of things. Very big documents. If you've still got it online to section 12.3, page 40, or it could be page 8 of 13 because it wasn't clear in the document. I believe it's page 40. My only problem is that already so many of the HMOs are failing what I call to find the basic endorsement of this policy. I've just seen another one go through planning, and to be honest, it's going to create even more havoc as far as approximately 6 to 8 rubbish bins being left on the pavement because there is no way that they could store them anywhere else, and we don't effectively enforce it. I appreciate our enforcement team are quite limited and they've got a big backlog in numbers, but there's nothing in these policies that actually says no, we don't accept that HMO because of these reasons. It seems like as a council we still accept that they're going to be granted even when a local councillor puts up opposition and points out that this isn't in the right place in the right area. So while I'm fully happy for you to bring a policy in that combines the three councils together, I just don't think that we're actually addressing the situation as enforcement and correctness, and all we're doing is creating more areas within a half mile of the stump, which is bringing down the areas because they just don't look effectively or good because they've not got the conditions that you almost say there in the policy about storage of rubbish. They're left out on the pavements. So how can we keep allowing them more and more, even if we don't endorse on the old ones?
Thank you, John. Yeah, I take your point. There's a number of areas where legislation does prevent what local authorities are able to do, and that respectively is in respect of even mortgage refusals. We cannot refuse a HMO license on those grounds. What we've done with our internal working practices and procedures on the back of this policy is set up more robust cross-departmental meetings where officers are meeting with waste operatives and planning and other departments on a more proactive basis to try and address some of the issues that you've raised here. We've also developed a risk rating matrix system to generate periodic inspections upon these HMOs so that they don't fall below the radar or off the radar, and so that we are able to fairly allocate our time and resources on the HMOs that do need more attention. So that's a number of ways that we're looking to identify and spend more time on the, if you like, more unmanaged or problematic HMOs. But we are quite restricted in respect of what we can refuse, as well as what we can enforce against, such as the waste side of things, which would require different departments of the council to look into that and address that with fixed penalty notices or whatever their legislation prevails.
Councillor,
Sorry, I just need to come back. Other areas of the country do have restrictions on the amount of HMOs that they allow in a certain area, or how many in a certain street. Is it something that you feel that this council should be looking at, is to put more further hardline restrictions on how many properties are being taken over, which probably currently is around about 3 a month, from single dwelling houses to create HMOs? And is it something you feel that this council should look to reduce by bringing in restrictions in how many HMOs can be in a certain area or a certain street?
Certainly, all the councils have taken that approach. That does tend to be through the planning legislation, through Article 4. It's something that Boston Borough Council has considered over the years, but has never moved forward with. As I say, it's a piece of planning legislation which, although the Housing Standards Team would obviously give evidence and would be brought into that debate, it's not something that we've actually led on, because it's not within our our jurisdiction, shall we say, or our devolved powers that are placed on the team. The purpose of this policy, predominantly though, is how we deal with the HMOs that are granted that license, that are allowed to be operating as HMOs. But absolutely, fully take on your point that if it's a control measure that's wanted to be looked at in terms of should they be there in the first place, again, I think, to be fair, that would probably need to sit with the discussion with the planning team as to whether that's something they could bring forward.
Also, councillor, maybe you'd like to talk to some other councillors and see if there's enough of you interested in a task and finish group or something to look into what other councillors are doing, what other councils are doing, and what possibly we've got. That's something that we could do within our own work programme. Councillor Danny.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Actually, I was going to come to the HMOs because a few of them, they used to be near me on Brothertoft Road, and there is other places. And what I have noticed, we lack regular inspections, because some of them, the main thing, I mean, they cause a damage to the neighborhood where they are. Otherwise, by creating a lot of noise at night, fights and fly tipping, which is one of the major things, and it's putting a big impact on the council. That's one thing. The second thing, have we thought about working closely with the residents in Boston in identifying illegal HMOs, because there is plenty in Boston, which is one person rents and then he gets another 10 or 12 people living with him in the same place. And that's again puts a big impact on our environment by fly tipping again and noise. So as I say, the report is good, but I think we should look at this too, because I think working closely with the resident, we can achieve something. And as councillors, we are at the front line of answering these questions to the public, because sometimes they ask you who is living here. We don't know. They are coming. There is new. There is, and it does happen. And I can tell you, on Irby Street, there is some houses there. The damage is beyond imaginations. You will find all kind of chairs, flowers, pots, anything. It's just on corridors, and they are probably illegal HMOs. So, as I say, it would be nice to work with the local residents and you know, and encourage them to report if there is anything like that.
Well, just for that was coming, but just for that, just to clarify that, yeah, 100% absolutely take on board the eyes and ears of whether it's residents, whether it's local members, whether it's some of our other external partners that we work with. We rely on everybody to play their part to let us know what's going on out there. We do have regular task force days, should we call them, where we go out with the police and fire colleagues to look at properties that are on either any of our radars that would absolutely be beneficial for all three of us to go around and look at. So that might come from just a fairly innocuous visit from a police officer for maybe a local disturbance, but then once I've looked through the property, realise that there's 15 beds in a 3-bedroom property, that gets put on the list to be inspected on the next task force day. We do pick up quite a lot of work through that, and we pick up a lot of HMOs that have been not just licensable HMOs, but even those that are unlicensable and that are below standard, and that's a core part of the team's work, is to pick up on those. It is a constant battle, because as soon as we find out one of those properties is being occupied, it can empty very quickly, and then it might lead to details of subletting that's going on, that we try and unravel to find out who's actually behind all this, by which point a lot of people have moved on, and we can disrupt the problem, but it's then finding out where it's gone next. So absolutely, any information that anybody can give us, whether it's members of the public or whether it's other officers from other organisations, it's all well received and always investigated, because at the end of the day, if we know it's going on out there. We've got a lot of landlords who run HMOs in a legal fashion and doing the job absolutely as they need to do, but we're also aware that there's plenty that won't come forward, that don't want to engage with us. Outside of that, just going back to the comment in terms of the question in terms of the multiple issues that we may face, we do have the management regulations which allow us to intervene where, if we feel that a landlord isn't managing the HMO correctly, be it for maintenance, for refuge provision, or whatever else it might look like, we've got that part of the legislation which helps and assists us with should we say, the day-to-day running of a HMO. That's why it's called the management regulations. So again, it's something that it crops up as part of our periodic inspections. We'll pick up on these as we're doing our periodic inspections, but we're also reliant on complaints to come in to alert us of anything that may be cropping up in between such time as we're due to go round.
Yep.
It is a very difficult situation. I do understand that one. And I give just an example for information. Sydney Street, I think a few years ago, it was some disturbance in a house, and it was attended by the police and I think by the council. And then they found like 18 stolen bicycles at the back. And then were like 15 people living in the house. So the people who were living next door to them, they were really having a hard time. And when you ask them, why didn't you report it? They will say, well, we did report these things, but nobody listens. And this is the thing where the residents sometimes lost the faith in the council to deal with the certain issues. And as I said, we have to trust our residents, and then we have to work with them to identify where there is the wrong thing, where there's the illegal thing is coming. And then, because our main thing is to protect the people who lives in Boston, the people who works hard, the people who pay their taxes, not to have this kind of behavior around them. So I will report as much as I can.
And we'll just come back to just give members some assurance that there's a new initiative. It's a national initiative that's Operation Jigsaw, or it's just been called Jigsaw now, which has identified that housing plays a huge part in organised crime, and whether that's from modern day slavery to illegal HMOs to cannabis grows to anything and everything that housing in itself, well, to put it bluntly, everybody's got to live somewhere, and people who are committing crimes also need to live in a property. So first and foremost, there are criminals living within properties, and sometimes some of that criminal activity leads out into their own properties or properties that they are responsible for. That's in essence what Operation Jigsaw was founded for. We've been working very closely from the early days of Operation Jigsaw, so we're well embedded now within that process that is building up. The timing of it is really quite appropriate, because we've got the Renters' Rights Act that's just received the royal assent, that is now we've got that starting to the timescale for that to be implemented coming in over the next 12 months, and some of the work within that aligns very nice and neatly with the Operation Jigsaw initiative. So it's the first time, certainly in my kind of career or lifetime, that I've ever witnessed this link up between organised crime and housing, actually given the due regard that we've all known has been there, but it's been more historically, it's been more down to individual officers making those connections between organisations that's made it work in a local capacity, rather than it being something that's been nationally led, and the organisations themselves being expected to engage and being accountable for engaging, or more I suppose more appropriately accountable if they're not engaging. So it's quite early days in regard to that. It's only been around for, it's only really started to grow about 12 months ago, but it's certainly something we're expecting to be engaging quite a lot with our police colleagues and others in relation to this, because of the national weight that's being put behind it.
Councillor Zbickian? Or did you want to come back?
If I may.
Yeah, certainly.
Just one thing, because I don't know how it's going to work. If he's going to stay with us in the council to decide, or, with our strategic alliance, what we have is probably to control the renting. I think we need to know which houses are rented. If we probably can introduce a license for renting, so we know which houses are rented, and then it will make it easy for us to tackle the crime around. I don't know if it stays with us in our council, or with the trio, or with the government. I'm not sure what it is, but I think it will be a good initiative, or if we can use it as a pilot scheme, probably in Boston, so we can control the renting and see who is renting, who is not renting. If we have their names, then it's easy to collect council tax. It's easy to know who is responsible, if people are illegal, not legal, whatever. So just an idea. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Sorry.
We've got a response to that.
Yep.
Okay, yeah.
Thank you, Chair. In respect of controlling the private rented market more, there is a national database that's being enrolled as part of the Renters' Rights Act, which will require all landlords to register all properties that they rent out, whether HMOs or not, and pay a yearly and annual fee for that. But that will also require them to submit all documentation to local authority, be it the gas safety certificates, electric certificates and such things, as well as answering prescribed questions around the type of dwelling that they own. So there'll be a national database that local authorities are able to utilise. In addition to that, there's new investigatory powers that come into force as of the 27th of December, enabling officers to take more proactive response around enforcement and seizing documents on site and such things. So there's a lot more power being delegated to local authorities.
No. Thank you. Councillor Zbickian and then Councillor Pride.
I would like to come back to empty properties. Do you know how many we have of them in Boston? And another one, how we classify them, that they're empty? Do we have residents coming and reporting them, or do we have a member of staff who goes in Boston monthly and check? Obviously, we work with police, ambulance, but what's the procedure?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So in respect to the local context, we do have approximate figures, but these we understand that we need to do further work around that and contact around the council tax departments to get more accurate and up-to-date figures. These are reported in by various means, as you say, by members in the general public. The page 5 of the empty homes policy gives the local context with the figures around that. Sorry, John. Yes, the number of vacant dwellings in Boston as of 2020 was 170. So that gives a rough context to that, but we are looking for more robust and updated figures so we can take more proactive action around that. Sorry, John, would you come in on the second?
Well, then second part was just in terms of the inspection regime. I think you're asking at the minute. No, we don't, but that would absolutely be part of moving forward with our data collection. Will be to try and again capture a better picture of this. So not just from council tax data, but from from inspection work, from other information from our partners, so that we can actually have a more accurate understanding of within that number which properties are vacant and have been vacant for say maybe 10, 15 or 20 years that are not, where there's no plan in place to them to be occupied, which ones are actually actively being up for sale, which ones have been renovated. That's all part of where we want to get to first and foremost. As over the next, once the policy has been adopted, we'll put timescales in place then for how we'll be doing that across the partnership, obviously specifically for Boston Borough for this meeting, so that we can have an idea of those which are with the best will in the world probably going to look after themselves, but we'll still want to keep an eye on to make sure that they are progressing through either with renovation or with sale. But those where we know we're going to need to basically concentrate our efforts on to either persuade or cajole or enforce the way through getting the property occupied again.
Yeah, with that. Councillor Pryke.
Thank you, Chair. What Councillor Darney was talking about a few minutes ago sounded very much to me like selective licensing. And my experience of selective licensing elsewhere was such that the system was made really, really hard to implement by the then government. And I remember in Boston, I brought a matter of poor landlord standards to the previous administration before 2023, and two members of that administration who are no longer councillors told me that they were the landlord's friend and were not interested in selective licensing. And as far as I know, we have no selective licensing in Boston Borough at the moment. But what you were talking about sounds like an advance on that, and I think we'd all appreciate a briefing on what is now going to be possible, because I think we all know that we do have some poor landlords around, which are not good for anyone. And whatever powers the government is going to allow local authorities can be welcomed. I'm not saying we should use them all. We may not need to use any of them, but it would be useful if we could have a briefing on what will be possible, please.
Yeah, so in terms of, I'll do it in reverse order. In terms of briefing, yes, that's something we've been talking about very recently, just in terms of the work that we'll be putting out for the Renters' Rights Act, so that everybody, as best as can be, are aware of what the new powers are, but also what's available, not just for us in terms of enforcement, but in terms of our residents, so they know what to expect from us, but also our landlords, so they know how they're meant to be operating to stay the right side of the law. So we've got a landlord forum on the 21st of January coming up at Boston United Football Club, which is kind of our launch event, should we say, for the, not solely, well, it's probably for the Renters' Rights Act. We'll be discussing other things at that meeting, but it's primarily to have that on as an agenda, or as a topic for that day. But it won't just stop there. It won't be that won't be the only time we'll be doing that, because it will be a seismic change, I think, really, for a lot of landlords, but also for a lot of councils that are then going to be enforcing this. You're correct in saying that, yes, we don't have selective licensing within the borough. It has been debated twice, I think, in the last 10 years. On each occasion, it was felt that the work that would be needed to establish whether we needed to, not to actually introduce it, but to establish the evidence to determine whether selective licensing actually would be beneficial or not to the borough, was so prohibitive that it was decided to concentrate our efforts on enforcement with the existing powers that we've got. Just by way of, I suppose, explanation, selective licensing tends to appear in probably bigger conurbations that have got issues such as student accommodation, or thousands of private rented properties within very small confines of a city. Oh, but yeah, which are normally HMOs, to be fair, but also within that defined area, having lots of other issues such as antisocial behaviour, environmental crime, that are going hand in hand with it. And although we appreciate that's been experienced within Boston, the scale of that on those previous occasions hasn't really felt to warrant the investment required to establish the evidence in order to go forward. That's not to say that moving forward it wouldn't be, but that's just to give you a picture of where it's been looked at for the last, certainly twice in the last 10 years.
Thank you for that, everybody. So we've been asked to recommend to Cabinet this report. Can I just say that I firstly, obviously, understand the sensibility of having all three councils of the Cinema Court, but also I thought this was particularly well written and very understandable, which is what we want with a report or with a policy, so that at least people can understand and make sure that it has been enforced properly. So I congratulate on what was obviously a lot of work on that. So I'd say we're being asked to recommend the report and the appendices to Cabinet for approval. Is there a proposal for that? Councillor Danny, is that seconded? Councillor, yep, thank you. Yep. Do you need to talk, or you're okay here? Councillor Drayton, you're just seconding, but you don't want to talk on that, no. Fine, thank you. So those in favour, please show. Is there anybody against? No, that's carried unanimously. Andy, you're against? One against. Any abstentions? No, thank you for that. This now moves us on to the revised housing allocation policy, which I think is some of the same team. Our second item of business this evening is the revised housing allocation policy for Boston Borough Council, East Lindsey District Council, which starts on page 13 of the agenda. Is represented by the Group Manager Housing Services, Jason Oxby.
Good evening, Chair, Councillors. I do have a presentation if you're okay for me to share that.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, so as you've been told, I'm Jason Oxby. I'm the Group Manager for Housing Services across the partnership, and I've come to talk to you this evening about revisions that we've made to the housing allocation policy. So if you're not sure about housing allocation policies, it's what's used to decide who can join the housing register for social housing and the level of priority that we award to applications, and it sets out how we allocate homes across the borough. We're making changes to the policy because of some legislative changes that have come in recently. And we also wanted to take this opportunity to try and streamline some of the processes that we have to try and reduce the assessment times. We currently have a backlog of usually between 6 and 8 weeks to assess applications, which is a long time for people to have to wait to find out whether they can join the register before they can even start bidding for properties. So the recommendation for adoption. So adopting the policy will ensure we're compliant with the new legislation that's come in recently. If we don't do that, we're opening ourselves up to legal challenges. The revisions that we're aiming to make to the policy will reduce the waiting times for applicants and make the guidance clear for people. They make the system more responsive for applicants. We need to make these changes now to ensure the council is legally compliant to avoid that risk of challenge. The reasons for the recommendation. So the revised policy incorporates the recent legal changes, but that's in particular around exemptions for victims of domestic abuse and care leavers. So previously there was local connection criteria for those groups, which the government said we shouldn't have local connection criteria. Anyone who wants to apply to go on the borough's housing register, if they're a victim of domestic abuse or care leaver, should be allowed to join the register. That's national policy, so that's happening everywhere across the country. It's not just something here. So the revised content of the policy also will clarify some of the complex procedures. When you looked at the previous policy, some of it is quite difficult to understand, so we've tried to make it clearer for applicants and for staff as well, which then is going to reduce some of the challenges that we do get from applicants when they don't understand the policy. The changes as well will support equality and safeguards vulnerable individuals and improves the operational efficiency of the service. So the important parts for you, so the key changes to the policy, so it's local connection requirements. So as I said, it brings in the new regulations. It removes that residency requirement for victims of domestic abuse and care leavers. The policy now will mean that fewer people without a local connection will qualify to join the register. Previously, a lot more people who didn't have any connection to Boston could actually join the register, but we've been able to change that other than certain exemptions, which includes, like I say, the victims of domestic abuse and care leavers. So by having less people on the register who don't have that local connection, it's going to improve the prospects of local people being able to get rehoused into the area. Another change that we're bringing in, which did cause some confusion for applicants, we're setting an upper limit of £60,000. So if someone's got £60,000, which could be in equity or savings, whatever, we won't allow them to go on the housing register now, unless there's some certain exemptions. So if someone's come out of the forces and they get a lump sum, we would disregard that because that's there for them for their future. There's certain people who try and join the register who may have significant amount of savings, but they can't actually go out and buy the type of property or rent the type of property they need. So that could be like your supported accommodation, like warden schemes, extra care schemes. So we'll have some exemptions. We're also introducing a housing debt threshold. So we get people who try and join the register who've got significant debt owing, and they're not making any efforts to clear that debt, which doesn't set a good example for them to be a new tenant with a social housing provider. So we're bringing in this target of £500. We don't want anyone to have a debt of more than £500. And if they do, we won't allow them to join the housing register until they've proven to us that they are intending on clearing those arrears by sort of like making 8 instalments to reduce that debt. We're updating the banding criteria in regard to band 1. I'll try and explain this one to you because this one's quite a complicated one. So we're introducing a time-based banding with band 1 status after 120 days of homelessness to ensure fairness. What we were finding was when people apply to us as homeless, if I give you a case example, someone could be, they might have, say, had a relationship breakdown, had to move in with family, They're struggling to live with family because of overcrowding. You could have an elderly parent who's got health issues, so they end up asking them to leave. What we were finding was that some people will work with us, and we can encourage them to stay where they are for a much longer period of time to give us that better opportunity to try and help them get private rented accommodation or get social housing. But because they were working with us, which was helping us, it's resulting in them having to wait much longer to get into band 1 on the housing scheme compared to somebody who wasn't prepared to work with us. If someone isn't prepared to work with us, we end up having to put them into temporary accommodation at great expense to ourselves. So we wanted to sort of like even this out to make sure that those who are prepared to work with us aren't penalised by having to wait longer to get up the register. We're not going to penalise those who aren't working with us, because the problem if we did that is they then wouldn't be well placed on the housing register, and we could end up blocking up our temporary accommodation, which again is great expense to us. So we're bringing in that criteria. For medical assessments, so we do award banding depending on people's medical circumstances. So if they've got health issues which are made worse by the property that they're in, we do ask for evidence, but we're now going to accept GP patient summaries. That's much quicker and easier for people to provide. Some people previously were going to the GP and asking to provide us with a letter, which would cost them a lot of money, and it didn't really provide very good information to us. So we're bringing that in to make it simpler for applicants. We were tightening up the criteria around refusal of offers. So what we found previously was there's very little penalty for people if they bid on a property and they turned it down. There's very little penalty for that. So they were just bidding on lots and lots of properties and then deciding whether it was of interest to them at a later date, which can be a waste of time, our time, but also a waste of time for the housing associations, and it could increase their void periods. So we're bringing in this criteria now. So if someone's in band 1 and 2, they can only refuse one property, and then they get down banded by one band. And we're doing the same for band 3 and band 4, penalising them if they do refuse properties. So that should then improve things for the housing associations. We have to consider quality and inclusion. So the policy now ensures service members and veterans receive fair consideration for housing, which is something we have to do as part of the Armed Forces Covenant that the Council is signed up to. We always complete a quality impact assessment. That's to make sure that any of the protective characteristics like age, disability, etc., we're not penalising people. So we've done that to ensure the policy is legally compliant. And the policy demonstrates the Council's commitment to a fair, inclusive system that meets the diverse needs of the borough. When making any changes to the policy, we do have to consult with different organisations to get their input into the changes that we're making. So we're making sure we're getting that good feedback. So we always do engage with the registered housing providers. That's the housing associations like Amplius and Lincolnshire Housing Partnership. We've contacted medical experts and housing consultants to get their view to make sure the policy is legally compliant. The legislation that we worked to is quite complicated. This is why we did consult the housing consultant who's helped and supported us with the policy. So then we should avoid then getting any legal challenges. We also ensure that we consult with teams within the councils. That's our own housing and homeless teams, or sleeper team, the housing adaptations team, just to make sure they can get comment on the policy to make sure it works for them. So we've incorporated wide feedback to ensure the policy is legally sound and effective. So the benefits of the revised policy, as I mentioned, it will streamline the application handling. So it will mean we're getting applications processed faster, so applicants aren't having to wait so long before they can start bidding. Should be a better customer experience because of having the clearer criteria and better guidance for our customers. And the structured banding and prioritisation enables the vulnerable groups such as the domestic abuse victims, armed forces, community and care leavers to receive fair consideration within the policy. So on to the recommendations. So it's for yourselves to decide whether you support the changes and whether you can recommend it to go forward to Cabinet to be adopted. Any feedback that you want to pass on to me tonight will be taken into consideration, and that we can then either update the policy and discuss this at Cabinet briefing. That's the end of my presentation.
Thank you. That was a very clear presentation. Thank you for that. Councillor Welbury.
Yeah, thank you very much. Great report, but what really worries me especially within with housing associations, is the fact that they don't pepper pot on estates, that they put vulnerable people all together in one sector of a housing estate, which causes more social issues. We've just heard from the previous agenda item about Operation Jigsaw and how where you live, your home, is related or can be related to organised crime. And I do find that quite a lot. I've seen it myself and experienced it myself. How can we prevent people like LHP putting, say, drug users together, or vulnerable people next to people that are known drug users, or have made themselves homeless previously, or have been, involved with organised crime? How can we actually talk to LHP and say, can we please pepper pot and have some input into where vulnerable people are actually placed within new housing development?
Yeah,
I mean, it is a real problem.
yeah, there's several steps to that. The first one is if someone's committed severe antisocial behaviour, they wouldn't qualify to join the housing register in the first place. But we could accept someone on, say, today, they might not come up for a property for 6 months' time. So we're reliant then on that housing association to do the checks themselves, which they do tell us they do. It's not in their interest to create problem estates because they then have to manage that. So it's really difficult for them, which I do understand where you're coming from. One of the things within the policy that allows them to do is sensitive let. So if there's a specific street where there's known problems, they can decide who they go off that property to. So if the person comes first, they've got some like poor tenancy history, they can decide we're not going to put them on there. We will bypass them. We will go to the next person we know has got a real good tenancy history, and we'll move them on there. The difficulty you have is those streets get bad names, don't they? And once the street's got a bad name, people don't want to go there unless they're desperate.
No, just come back on that.
Yeah.
I'm talking about new housing estates. I'm talking about new tenants, first time. Nobody else has actually lived in the property. That the vulnerable people with different social issues are being put together in one area of those estates, creating a ghetto. I mean, I brought this up before, but I'm seeing it more and more. I'm experiencing it more and more, and it's not getting any better. And in fact, one housing estate I know resulted in a death the other week because of gang-related issues. And this particular person was persecuted to take his own life. And that's what I mean. Those people are known to social services and to LHP as having been vulnerable, and yet they're still housed together. I just wondered what we can do. What you're saying to me does not answer my question.
No.
What can we do? Can we have a meeting with LHP? Can we bring the social services in, because they're dealing with these kind of issues all the time, to try and stop this happening, or to come up with a plan? Thank you.
Chair, you okay if we come back on that?
Oh, yeah,
I
certainly,
think the suggestion that you have is correct. We do meet with the housing association where there are known problems. If you know of sort of examples of certain states where this is happening, we can meet with them and ask them to review what has gone on here. How did this person end up getting rehoused? Have they slipped through the net? Have you done all the proper checks yourself? You might have someone today who's absolutely perfectly fine, but next week there might not be. So it's around the support services that they're putting in there. Are their support services effective to help those people and deal with those issues?
Can I just come out? I think you've just hit the nail on the head. There is no support services. This is part of the issue. That when people are actually housed, the services that they need in order to help them live within their own home, especially if you have been homeless, are not actually there, or lacking, or they are there after the event. So what you've just said is a good idea, to actually bring all the services together before those people are home, because it only puts more issues back on the council and on the council services and resources to actually resolve these issues.
Yeah, I know what sort of services are out there and what the housing association should do, but I couldn't tell you exactly what LHP do themselves, and that's where we'd need to call them in to ask them and say, give them specific examples. Because I know if you've got a tenant who's got specific health vulnerabilities or addictions, there are services out there who they can refer into to get that help. I expect a lot of those services are oversubscribed, and there certainly does need to be more support. each area does have its own like housing neighbourhoods officer who should be dealing with all those issues. But I expect many of them are dealing with hundreds and hundreds of properties, so they probably don't have the capacity to deal with it to the relevant required level.
Also, when you are involved with organised crime, you don't really want to squeal on your neighbours, do you? You don't really want to be saying, well, you know, I'm being cuckolded here. Please help, because you know that that's going to spiral out and your life may be in danger.
You happy with that? Yeah, Councillor Izard, then Councillor Danai.
Yeah, thank you. Just for clarification, victims of domestic abuse, do they have to have appeared or gone to court or at least got to the state of reporting it to police, or will you just accept the word genuine from a person suffering domestic abuse that they need to be rehoused? How is the clarification made?
Yeah, we're not allowed to demand evidence because some people, it could be the first time they've suffered domestic abuse. They know that if they report that, say, to the police, the domestic abuse could then escalate even further. We'll talk to them through what has happened. Are there any support agencies involved? Have you talked to anyone about it? And then we make our decision on that. We don't actually ask for evidence because it's not something that's very easy to evidence, is it? If it's just like verbal abuse, for example, how do you evidence that?
Councillor Danny.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was going to talk about the same at what Councillor Welbury has said. Sometimes we found this mix of people in one area, which is probably they have more or less the same interests, the same activities, and it creates a lot of issues. And actually, I think last week we had a meeting with LHP, which is basically their answers were all positive. Yeah, we do that, but it doesn't. And I raised some few points, which is as a councillor who represents Fanside, we have some roads where specifically you have issues. And I do believe that first appearances count, and there is people with sofas and rubbish all front of their houses, but they keep always complaining that the house is not fit for purpose. So my question, if a person comes like that and say, my house is not good, I don't want to stay there, I have 2 kids with me, I'm a single parent, and I would like something else, and probably they go somewhere else and they will practice the same thing. What's the situation? How do you deal with these situations? Because their background is not good.
First thing that we look at is why do they want to apply for social housing? And if whatever reason they give, we look at, is there a way to resolve that so they don't need to move? So if there is antisocial behaviour or there's problems with the property, we look at how can that be resolved. So that would be talking to the different departments. So it could be the housing standards team who is here. It could be talking to the housing association to try and overcome that, because just moving a problem doesn't solve it. It just moves the problem along somewhere else. You need to overcome those difficulties. There is what is known as local lettings policies. So if you get a specific street where there are a lot of issues on that street, so it stands out way more than anywhere else. So it could be like a significant overcrowding issue on that street, or it could be a significant antisocial behaviour issue. You can introduce specific policy just for that street that then enables a tighter criteria to be brought in as to who is actually going to be considered on that street. So that is something that can be done where there are those sort of issues. It's not for like a general, the whole area, it's just like a specific area. We've got one problem. Once you resolve that problem, then you should remove that local lettings policy.
Yep.
So it's good. I mean, you give me enough point there to consider. However, as I said, LHP, they are the main landlord on certain areas in Boston. And you can go to certain streets where there is the same practice, which is it's a look-alike between Wood Farm Road probably to the estate of Fanside. You can go to Skerbeck and you find the same pockets of things. So my question was before, as an authority ourselves, we have to consider the past of people and how they were threatened their homes. Are they threatened their homes as a home, or they just cause damages and put rubbish, like I say, in front of the house? And then they came to you and they say, listen, we cannot live there. So the question here is, how do you deal with LHP? Is there a strict measures to make them check the property and deal with it and see if they can repair, which will not cost us money to deal with it? Do you do that, or you go different ways with them?
We do often liaise with them, but the problem is we have no specific control over what they do. We can only talk to them and ask them to make changes. That some of the housing associations, in my view, are not held to account as much as what they were many years ago. The government's slowly bringing in changes. So, like, they've brought lots of changes in about damp and mould, haven't they, because of the AWAB situation. They check the housing association in regard to their financial stability, etc. But there doesn't seem to be a lot of accountability around managing tenancy estate issues. And it'd be great if something was brought in, because then we could hold them to account. We could say, you have to do this, this and this, why aren't you doing it? When now all we can do is just ask them to come in and talk to us. And like it's been said, they come in and tell you wonderful things, but you're not seeing it happening on the ground. And that's where we don't have that real control over them. But we have no issue contacting them. You're often contacting them, councillor, aren't you, to try and solve problems?
Emily here.
Yes, and thank you, Councillor Danny. I think we've slightly drifted off from the purposes of the allocations policy, which we brought to you this evening. But I was just going to add, we have actually recently met with LHP, haven't we? Through
yes, some of the councillors were here.
Through other scrutiny matters.
Yeah.
Yes, and LHP have promised that a further meeting is going to be arranged. So we can certainly take lots of the comments that have been raised today, and we have tried to build a real positive relationship with LHP and other registered providers in the borough, because we really see that actually if we can work collaboratively and really have positive connections, then that seems a good starting place. But very happy to take those points back. Thank you.
And I mean, thank you for the good work you do, and I'm very happy, to support what you have here, because transparency and helping people is an essential thing. I mean, that's what the society is about and communities are about, is to help each other and provide each other, with a good living, good standards of life. And I mean, but thank you very much. But thank you for taking the point.
Councillor Pryke.
This is on the additional preference aspect of fair consideration points. Terminally ill applicants. Would this apply to any one member of a household who's terminally ill, and how terminal does it have to be?
A difficult one to answer. So with any policy, they say you can't fetter your discretion, which means you've got to have flexibility within there. So we would look at each case on its individual circumstances. As long as that person is part of the household who's going to be moving, we would consider them. But we'd also look at what is that terminal illness, because I've come across cases before where people have been terminal for like 10 years, and that's not what it's about. It's about someone who is probably in a property that is very unsuitable for them because of the issue they're going through, and we need to get them moved quickly because to stop the suffering that they've got in that current property. So it is a case of looking at each case on its individual merits.
Okay, thank you. The other one is politically tricky, in as much as there's quite a bit of prejudice against foreigners being housed when armed services connection people do not get immediate housing when they want it. Now, obviously, there's armed forces members have to have a local connection in order to qualify, but how tenuous can that connection be? I grew up in Boston. I joined the army 40 years ago, but I left 35 years ago. I now want to go back into Boston. Please house me tomorrow. Is that possible? Because there are some political demands for armed services connections, almost however tenuous, to have preference over everything else, which I do not agree with myself, but I know this is a pressure on housing providers.
Yeah, so if they've been in the armed forces, then they can join the housing register. It then depends on their housing circumstances to what level of priority they're given on the housing register, because they could be in very suitable accommodation and they'd be low on the register. They could be in very unsuitable accommodation. We've put them high up. We've also got within the policy that additional preference. So if they've come out of the forces, I think it was within 5 years, and we can backdate their application. Certain situations where we backdate it, so it puts them higher than other people who have only just joined the register. So that's the level of priority that we do currently award to them. surprisingly, we don't get a huge number of applications from people from the armed forces, and sometimes they don't even come forward to say they're ex-forces. So somehow we need to try and encourage them to do that. They are the questions there on the online application process for them to complete and let us know when they were in the forces and how long ago. So that information is there. But I understand what you're saying, that there's, like, you get a lot of foreign people who they're entitled to go on the housing register as well. Some of them could have lived in Boston a very long time. They could probably have a stronger connection than someone who's previously in the armed forces. So it's a difficult balance.
Thank you. Everybody have a say? Again, can I thank you? That was a very good, clear sort of presentation on the policy. Again, I think it's well worded and easy for people to understand, which is important. And I think what you're trying to achieve with it is good. So we've been asked here to Councillor Denny. I was going to say, we've been asked to recommend it to Cabinet. You're proposing it. Thank you. Is it seconded, Councillor Izard? All those in favour, please show. Anybody against? Carried. Thank you. Thank you for that. Yeah, that's okay. That's right, don't worry. Yeah, that's right. Christian, can you become my wingman?
Can do, yeah.
So we now come to item 3, which is our social media policy. The third agenda item this evening is social media policy, which starts on page 21 of the agenda. This will be presented by the Group Communications and Engagement Manager, Sean Gibbons. Sean. Thank you. And so the button in the middle.
Is it the one in the middle? Superb. Thank you
And
very
you
much.
should go red. Yep.
I've gone red. Or where's someone? Good evening, members. As the chair said, this is what we have in front of you is the Partnership Social Media Policy, which is effectively a collective of policies across the 3 councils and making them into one single document. Just wanted to draw members' attention just to 3 parts of the policy. The first one is around moderation. This is how we propose to ask people to behave online and on our social media channels in particular. The second one is around our response protocols and setting a level of expectation that when people do contact us on our social media channels, how they're what level of service that they get and timely responses to some of their questions and queries. And then the third one is around operational focus and about how we're going to utilize our social media channels to a better degree, and that's looking at more along the lines of data and the interpretation of some of those insights that we get, along with a strategic focus for each of those channels. If I may as well, Chair, just to draw attention to a couple of minor anomalies within the policy. On page 7, right at the bottom of page 7, it should say LinkedIn instead of Facebook. So I apologise for that. And we also include in the document, we make reference to PSPS's SLA. I think we mentioned it once as 3 days and the second one as 5 days. We're just in discussions with PSPS at the moment just to look at what that SLA is going to look like in terms of the response time. So apologies for those small anomalies.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there to open the meeting? Has anybody any comments to make on the policy or any questions? Councillor Danny.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to, bring something which is I've been advocating for a long time. I think as a councillors, I think we should be very careful when using the social media, especially like Facebook. And some of the councils sometimes engage in conversation with different members on that one. And sometimes you just create probably more problems for us than probably sorting out a problem, because the question they keep coming And sometimes the councillors, they don't have that ability to know everything. So the answers keep, getting everywhere. And I think as a councillor, we should be more careful with that and keep ourselves to ourselves. And also, if the local media approach us, I think we should consult with you guys and see what we can say, what we cannot say. So just to protect ourselves and protect the council in the same time. That's what I want to say. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that's a very good insights there, Councillor. I think as regards some of the comments moderation on social media channels, Councillor Dunley, I think that's a really good point. And you're right, not every conversation, particularly if it's non-service specific and is more of a sort of political rant from some of our members than from some of our residents, we may just have to step back a little bit as regards this. But a lot of this is around answering very service specific requests from our residents, and that's what we want to try to make sure that they get a good experience when they contact us on those channels. But thank you for your comments.
Nobody else? We're being asked to recommend this policy to Cabinet. Proposed by Councillor Danny. Is it seconded? Councillor Scoot. All those in favour, please show. Anybody against? No, that's carried. Thank you for your time with that. Which now brings us to item 4, Trees and Hedgerow Strategy Action Plan. So it's page 49. So the fourth item of business is the Trees and Hedgerow Strategy, which starts on page 49 of the agenda, and we're presented by the Environmental and Sustainability Officer, Heather Prescott, which is online. Can you hear us?
Yeah, thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we're fine.
Lovely, thank you. I've just got a brief overview from the report to share with you, if that's okay.
Yep.
Okay, lovely. So trees and hedgerows play a central role in our strategic response to the challenges of biodiversity loss and climate change. The changing climate and increased risk of extreme weather events such as flooding highlights the importance of our green infrastructure in protecting our communities, and the resilience of this infrastructure underpins our ability to adapt to climate change. The South and East Lincolnshire Councils Partnership adopted its tree and hedgerow strategy back in 2022. However, for reasons outlined in this report, a formal action plan to deliver the ambition and commitment of the three councils has not been previously agreed. So this report sets out the approach to taking forward a variety of work areas and projects to ensure that trees and hedgerows throughout the sub-region are appropriately managed, protected and enhanced for the benefit of all, in line with the previously adopted tree and hedgerow strategy. Tree planting is a high profile and go-to activity to address climate change, but it is critical that this is done with the principle of right tree in the right place. And it is also important that existing trees and hedgerows are managed and maintained to ensure their longevity and continued contributions to providing environmental and carbon benefits. Many areas of Boston are traditionally fenland landscape, and tree cover is therefore naturally much lower in these areas. This is recognised as an important landscape characteristic that should be maintained. Delivery timeframes for the work have been broken down into short, medium and long-term targets to recognise there are complexities around delivering this work and to ensure that quick wins are balanced against strategic and legacy building actions. This plan needs to dovetail with the emerging local nature recovery strategy for Lincolnshire, and a light touch review should therefore be undertaken once that is published, which is expected to be in late 2026, to ensure that the two documents complement each other. I would therefore ask that members of the committee consider the proposed tree and hedgerow action plan, providing appropriate feedback, and recommend the adoption of the action plan to Cabinet. Many thanks. I'm happy to take any questions.
Councillor Izard, then Councillor Scoot, then Councillor Danny, and Councillor Price.
Hello there, and good evening to you. As you quite rightly said, Boston hasn't got much tree covering. So have you worked with the Boston Woods Trust, which kind of really has quite extensive acreage of woodland in Boston. Have you engaged with them and talked through the policy with them as well? Or is this purely a council-based project?
Yes, thank you for the question. We haven't engaged with them at this stage in terms of consultation with the action plan, but as part of this work, the intention is that we will develop a sort of project board of officers to identify available land, sort of engagement with additional partners, and to sort of drive for a delivery of tree planting projects. So certainly I'm aware that we have previously met with them in terms of members of our team, so they certainly would be a group that we would look to engage with as part of that process down the line.
Yeah, thank you for that. Obviously, they do quite extensive tree planting now in the areas, so I would say that that would be most beneficial if you do have a good working partnership, and certainly they're obviously always looking for funding in certain ways, and they certainly do a good job for Boston and the residents at the moment. So I welcome that you do have some joint talks.
Councillor Scoot and Councillor Danny.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good evening. Page 51, 2.5 identifies Boston's got 11 hectares. Leading on from Councillor Izard's comments, where exactly have we got any areas in mind for these 11 hectares? Whereabouts are they?
Okay, so the 11 hectares that's been identified through the Friends of the Earth data, it gives us a sort of an idea of the available land use within the area. So we certainly wouldn't be anticipating that we would plant all of that hectareage that's been identified. In terms of identification of local sites within Boston and where those opportunities lie, we would have that data through the emerging local nature recovery strategy. As part of that document, there's something called biodiversity opportunity mapping, which highlights where those areas are for different types of planting, taking into account different landscape characteristics in different areas. So at this stage, I couldn't give you specific sites and things like that that have been identified, but certainly that data is emerging through that process that will help inform those decisions.
Thank you. Councillor Danny, then Councillor Pryke.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think Councillor Izard took my, my words. You stole them from me. Actually, yes, the Boston Wood Trust did a very good job. They just have planted, I think, probably less than 2 years, and I think 500 trees probably by Willoughby Road. And if Councillor Austin may correct me, we have 7 or 8 country parks around Boston. So there is a lot of trees around Boston. And I think as a small town, we're doing very well on that aspect. I think we keep them nice. A lot of people in Boston, they like them. And I don't live far from one of our, county parks. So as I say, we're doing right. And I think the Wood Trust is the right place to probably connect with and see what they're doing for the future. Because I think, and I will mention Adrian, he's doing a brilliant job. And I think I will thank him a lot. Wherever there is a space, he's planting a tree. And I think that's the way to go forward. But as I said, it would be good to connect with Adrian and do a Boston Wood Trust. As also, I will mention some of our councillors, we have a grant every year, so we give them the money as well to help them to put more wood. If you go on Fenside Road in my ward, there is already 2 places there, small forestries, people, they use them on summer, winter for walks. So it will be the right way to go through. But thank you very much for the report.
Councillor Pryke and Councillor Austin.
Thank you. Very good report. Thank you very much for it. Of course, trees and hedgerows are intimately linked with biodiversity, which I believe is the primary responsibility here for the Lincolnshire County Council. And some of us have a long history of trying to stop the County Council from cutting hedgerows while birds are nesting, for example. I think the county is now better educated on that, but it's still happening. Another aspect that I wanted to raise was it's very good to have policies on trees, hedgerows, biodiversity, and so on, but they interact with other things that are happening around the area. And as an instance of that, I would raise the problem that new-ish industrial developments are given planning permission with extremely bright security lighting on during hours of darkness. Such bright lights are fatal for butterflies and moths. Butterfly conservation, in particular the organisation, has got a national campaign to try and get lights not quite dimmed, but less bright on new facilities as a way of permitting butterflies and moths to survive better than they are doing at the moment. And we have one particular factory in Curtin, which has been identified as awful. But the Borough Council can't go back to the owners and say, please dim your lights, because we've given them planning permission. Things like that need to be borne in mind, probably across the council, not just planning, other things as well. So I would hope that this report and anything else we've got on biodiversity is spread around the council so that people are aware of these things. But thank you for this. It's work in progress, I realise. Thank you.
Councillor Austin and Councillor Izard.
Thank you, Chair. Now, trees grow, and trees need management, and they need careful management in some cases. 4 years ago, I was appalled by the lack of care of some of the beautiful trees that we've got in our town centre that are have to be managed by this council. I did a bit of a survey and made some recommendations, and I'm very pleased to say that those recommendations were put into place. But I think as part of a policy like this, we should have in place an understanding that our tree specialists every 2 years should go round, at least every 2 years, go round and report on the trees that are growing under our care and come up with proper management plans. I mean, just one example, if you go into the Wide Bargate, you see trees with fences. The trees have enveloped fences. There's ironwork going right through the trunk. I mean, it's a sign of very poor management in the past, and I think we should avoid that problem and have something in place. There are other two things in this action plan that are almost hidden away at the end, and they are, are we going to go away having got this policy in place and prepare an action plan? Are we going to have an action plan? Are we going to be having tree planting targets as is asked for in this vision? What is are we going to have some practical results like this from those two points in particular? Thank you, Chair.
Do you want to come back on that?
Yeah, thank you. So the tree and hedgerow strategy itself was adopted in 2022. So what I've brought forward today is the action plan itself. There is a section within that that talks about identifying a tree planting target. So we obviously want to have an aspirational planting target, but we also want that to be achievable as well. So there is it's a short-term action within the action plan to actually agree a target that we feel is realistic and achievable. And as I say, that sort of land identification piece of work and exploration of sort of available land will need to take place with officers from across different departments. So that will include the arboricultural officer and also our ecology officer that sits within the planning team as well. So those sort of actions will emerge from this, but it will need that sort of project team to do that investigative work, if you like. Also, to just come in on your first point around maintenance, I completely agree that it's really crucial that when we set out with planting schemes, we need to make sure that there's maintenance in place. My understanding is that the street scene department at East Lindsey is currently looking at developing a strategy around maintenance of trees. Christian, I don't know if you want to come in around that. You may have more information than myself.
Thanks, Heather. Yes. Councillor Austin raises a point, a valid point there, that the council ought to be setting an example with its own assets, and by assets I mean land where we have trees and hedgerows. We don't do a particularly good job of that at the moment, but I can assure Councillor Austin that I'm just looking in front of me at the partnership alignment and delivery plan, which is in development for 26-27 year, and there is a tree management policy task in that action plan, which specifically says to establish a policy for the management of trees the councils are directly responsible for in the partnership area, building on East Lindsey's current policy. This policy will include tree maintenance and tree risk management. So I think addressing those points of concern that you raise in respect of the council's tree and hedgerow assets and managing those in a way that sets an example to the broader stakeholders that are part of this overall strategy and action plan that has presented today.
Yep.
A point that perhaps often gets neglected, trees need to be, when they're planted together, there needs to be a thinning policy. So there should be some, felling going on as well as planting. And, we often plant trees and that's it. We expect them to look after themselves. But, there needs to be a long-term plan for a particular group of trees. And that really ought to be as much as 80, 100 years plan. I mean, certainly that's what happens in the Boston Woods Trust. I mean, there's now quite a lot of felling going on in the Boston Woods Trust because that is part of the plan that was set 25 years ago. And, so many, something like 1,200 trees are planted per acre in a wood, and their plan is that in 80 years' time there'll be only 350 trees to allow those trees to grow into beautiful specimens. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Councillor Izard.
Thank you, Chair. It was a point of clarification that I required, and I forgot about it. But on page 58, figure of canopy cover is 2.3% in Boston. But is that just land owned by the council, or was that land also owned by private individuals, or such as the Boston Woods Trust? Where did the figure of 2.3 actually come from? Can you give me any guidance on that?
Yes, so I believe that was from that same Friends of the Earth national data statistics that they provided. So as part of that work, they gave information around where we were in terms of the entire country, in terms of how heavily treed our areas were. So that's come from that data set.
Sorry, if I can add, just it will be irrespective of land ownership. It doesn't go into that detail. So that's an approximation of an assessment using national modelling of tree cover in Boston, regardless of land ownership.
Councillor Dunny.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's a question regarding the two council. I think the county council and Boston Borough Council. As we know, there is a lot of places which is they're owned by the county, and there is a lot of places where what Boston owns. Because we talk about the hedges, we talk about the trees, and I think I found it is a lack of responsibility from the county to look after their own trees sometimes. So how do you deal with these issues, please?
Yeah, so naturally we work closely with our colleagues at the County Council. So if we're aware of any problems with specific locations, we can certainly report that to the County Council. But ultimately, the maintenance of trees owned by the County Council would fall to themselves. And I'm not aware that we would it wouldn't be within our remit, I don't think, to be able to mandate that they specifically maintain trees unless it came under law in terms of dead, dying or dangerous sort of classification. So as I say, I think a bit like with the housing report earlier, it's a case of engaging and having those conversations, particularly if there's areas that you're concerned about.
Yep. And does the same applies on the Environment Agency? Because if we look like, for example, the river and the banks of the Widham, there is a lot of trees there, which is the Environment Agency's, duty to look after them, which is they don't. But then when you contact the county, they say it's not our duty to do that. We are not responsible. So sometimes you are just lost between these these administrations, and it doesn't give you any feedback. And then you have the complaints of our residents.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate the difficulties with that. As I say, I'd be more than happy if you have specific instances to try and direct the inquiry and get an answer regarding ownership, if that would be helpful.
Thank you very much.
Well, our comments have been obviously recorded, but we're asked to again recommend this policy to Cabinet. Is there a proposal? Councillor Pryke, is it seconded? Councillor Scoot. Oh, Councillor Drayton, thank you. Yes, Councillor Drayton, yes. All those in favour, please show. Carried. Anybody against? No, so that's carried. Thank you for joining us on that and for the report. We move on to the next item. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Which brings us to item fifth item of business this evening is the annual scrutiny report 24-25, which starts on page 71 of the agenda and will be presented by the Democratic Services team leader, Amanda Dickinson. Welcome, Amanda.
Thank you, Chairman. Good evening, members. I'm pleased to present the annual scrutiny report for 2024-25, which summarises the work undertaken by the former Environment and Performance Committee and Corporate Community Committee during the last municipal year. The report reflects input from the chairs of those committees and the lead officers who supported scrutiny throughout the year. It provides an overview of key activities, policy reviews and performance monitoring, demonstrating the role scrutiny plays in accountability and informed decision making. Following tonight's consideration, this report will go forward to full council in January. Happy to take questions.
Are there any questions on the report? No. In which case we're asked to recommend the report for full council in January. Is that a proposal? Councillor Scoot, is it seconded? Councillor Danny, all those in favour, please show. Anybody against? Carried unanimously. Thank you for joining us, Amanda.
Thank you, Chairman. Good night, everyone.
Yes, thanks. Bye. Which brings us to the sixth item on the agenda. The Q2 25-26 performance report. So this is item 6 on the agenda and starts on page 85 of the agenda. And we're joined by Suzanne Roll. Sorry for keeping you waiting.
Thank you very much. So this is the usual quarterly report, and it's only a month since you had the Q2 report. So there's not a huge Q1 report. So there's not a huge amount of change for me to report to you. There was a question at your last meeting around industrial units, and we have committed to including that data into the Q3 report because we haven't had time since the last meeting to put that in yet. The Q2 report was already written, but we will make sure that that information is in the next report. Just an update on where we are. There are 92 KPIs, 27 of those are targeted and 22 are on track. There are only 3 within tolerance and 2 that are reds that are not on target. Both of those are around complaints and subject access requests. So there's detail in the report about why they are reds, but basically with the complaints, there's a new process in place and there's an officer working group that's being put together to share good practice around complaints. And there's also with the information requests, that's often around a small number of requests can skew the figures. So it's around volumes and complexity, but nothing of concern on that one. It's been 100% up until this quarter, and we will keep an eye on it. And if there's an ongoing issue, we'll bring that back to you. So the main feature of the report is to feed into your work programme. So if there are any items on here that you'd like more information about that isn't already on your work programme, then we can pick that up. I know you've talked a lot about housing today. We've already mentioned leisure at your last meeting, but if there are any other items on there, then we can bring those forward. So happy to take any questions.
Are there any questions on the report? Councillor Azad.
Hello. Thanks for the report. And this is probably down to, as you say, you've already given the report, but just going back to, oh, there's no page numbers on this. Oh, there it is. Page 93. Yeah. Just on the percentage of household waste collected for recycling and deposited. We got the annual target only, but we don't show a reg status on that. Was that explained to me last time and I've forgotten?
I can't remember, but I can explain it. So what we do now is only report an annual figure in Q1 for that particular measure. So Q2 doesn't show a target to work against, but we are working with the County Council because there's been a change in the way that measure is recorded and we want to be able to bring it to you quarterly. So I think as part of all the changes that are happening in waste, we'll probably see some difference to the measures, but that's why.
That's lovely. And just one more. We do a lot of obviously bigger work and that, but do we ever take into account the number of families in temporary homes and the number of children that are not in a property? And we cover homelessness and various others, but do we actually ever break that down to find out how many of our residents are in temporary homes, in hotels and other situations, and do we have a percentage for that?
We have a measure on page 92 which is around families and children in bed and breakfast accommodation, but I don't know that we do that for some of the other elements of homelessness, so I can ask for a bit more of a breakdown into that for you.
Lovely, thank you.
Are there any other? Councillor Pryke and then Councillor Dunning.
This is a very general question. I'm wondering if, as a council, Boston Borough has any opportunity to change any of these targets before we're abolished.
We review the targets on an annual basis, but we can also review them quarterly. So if things change, so yes, it won't be very long until we're looking at the targets for next year, and we'll bring that forward to you when that's in place.
Councillor Danny.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just want to go to page 93, and we see it in green is the fly tipping, but according to certain sources, the fly tipping has increased in Boston. And we can see it, you can see it in many places now. So, because here we have 95% of collection, so we are doing good, but the reality is quite different.
Yeah, I think the collection is very good, but the number of fly tips is increasing and continues to. So we put some monthly figures onto the website so that you can see the incidences as well. If that's of interest, we update that every month, but we focus here on what we can do. So the performance is very good at collecting the fly tipping, but there's a lot more going on to try and address some of the issues around the increased incidence, the different hotspots and things like that. There's a lot more information. That might be something that you'd like an update on. I don't know how recently you've looked at fly tipping, but obviously that comes around regularly.
Mr. Chairman, I'm not sure if you can answer the question, because today was on the news that a lot of people, they throw batteries in the rubbish, and it has caused fire in many, plants, treating plants for rubbish and in lorries. Can we deal with that or get an update if anything has happened previously in Boston or not?
I can find out. I know it has happened before, and I know that they regularly, when these incidents happen, they put that onto social media to remind people not to put the batteries in the bins. But I'll find out some more context, but I know it has happened here before. Yeah.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? No, everybody all right? So again, thank you for the detailed report. Obviously, I always find it very easy to read, and it gives us a lot of information. And so, members, please remember that part of this exercise, as well as asking the questions, is if there are issues that you want to add to our work programme, to look into greater detail, the next coming up item will be where you can do that. So again, thank you for the report we've noted. So that brings us on to the work programme. You've got a copy of the work programme in front of you. Are there any items members wish to add to it? Councillor Izard, you were raising the point of HMOs. Do you want to come back to us on that, or?
I think, Chair, because obviously the Renters' Rights Act goes in Parliament in December. In May, it's going to be part of the law. My concern is around the endorsement or empowerment we've got, but then I believe the government are going to fund extra the councils to help with that policy. So that maybe let's leave and see how the Renters' Rights Act goes through and see what the council
Okay,
do.
no, that's fine.
Hopefully we should be employing more people to try to help our residents going forward.
Okay, no, thank you. Anybody else? Councillor Pryke, then Councillor Dunny.
This is a bit of additional information on the town centre working group.
Yep.
I've received more and better information on both the incentives the council can offer to businesses to reoccupy empty premises, and also more and better information on how Boston can promote itself, leaflets, visitor centre, opening the Guildhall for longer, stuff like that. But this is, well, the destination management plan is coming to our next meeting in January anyway. And I expect that after we have that, which we don't have yet, that will answer a number of our other queries which are outstanding. So I am hoping that we'll be able to convene our mini group and bring a potentially final report to the February meeting.
Oh, that's great. Councillor Danny.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just would like, because we're on the 15th of January 2026, we have the highways. Will it be possible to invite the portfolio holder from the highways?
We actually have.
Yeah.
Ray, would you like to?
Thank you, Chair. Just to update you, the portfolio of highways has now confirmed that he will attend the March meeting. So he confirmed today. So that's great new information.
Yeah, and can I actually thank Ray? He's actually put a lot of work into trying to get the speakers to these meetings. I think it is important that we do, meet with outside bodies. The LHP one, I think, was that's with BTAC, and it's not quite the same thing, but we do have to, they are our democratic service are putting an awful lot of work into getting people to attend this, so it shouldn't go unnoticed. Councillor Drayton.
Yes, maybe we should invite the police to the meeting of the HMOs, because everybody should be around that table.
Invite who, sorry?
The police.
Yep.
And let's get it thrashed out. And, if everybody's together, we'll probably be able to go forward. Okay.
There is a policing item on the forward plan for February. I don't know whether Ray, you've got anything else to add on that, but there could be questions posed there to the police, I'm sure, around a whole host of issues across the borough.
I'm currently just waiting for final confirmation. Chief Constable has agreed to come to our April meeting. I'm just waiting for his EAPA to just confirm that, which would be provide members an opportunity to raise questions.
Is everybody happy now with the work programme? Yeah, thank you. And we'd already passed the exempt minutes, so the meeting is closed. Thank you everybody for attending, and I suppose we better do the happy Christmas bit. Happy Christmas. Bar humbug. Thanks, Ray. Actually, that was good, them on separate pages. It made me a little bit easier for me.
I will always do it that way.
Yeah, yeah.